Like I've said before, my name is Gabrielle Haby. I am a fourth-year PhD student in the Department of Chemistry, but I've been a TA for over 7 years. So if you do the math right, I was a TA as an undergraduate. It's one of the ways that I paid my bills when I was working on my bachelor's. We had a really small school. There was no graduate program. So once you took the class, the next semester, you were eligible to teach it as a TA. I think I was the only chemistry major to graduate in the last 4 years, so pretty much if you had chemistry at that university, you had me as a TA. Sometimes I would teach anywhere from 4 to 5 sections a semester. I had no lab tech, so I had to prep all the chemicals myself. I did all the grading myself. So I've come from having a really intense experience to having a really pleasant experience here at UTSA. I kind of feel spoiled from where I'm coming from. In our TA training in the past, there has not been a session dealing specifically with labs, okay, and labs in the sciences. And one of the comments that we kept hearing over and over is, this session is not relevant to me. This isn't relevant, this is not going to help me. So this is our first semester to build this type of a session into the training, okay? So we weren't really sure what to cover. That's one of the reasons why we left it really short, to make sure that we had time to answer any questions that you may have specifically about labs in the sciences, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. Okay, so it's going to be pretty short. I think I only have 22 slides in the handout, and then we're going to have plenty of time for your questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And what I want to ask you is, what inspired you to become a scientist? What encouraged you to go to graduate school? And more specifically, who inspired you? Okay, who inspired you to become a scientist? So you're going to go ahead and use your clickers. A, if it was a parent, a friend, if you had a teacher, and maybe they didn't necessarily inspire you, maybe they just showed you that something that you thought was really hard really wasn't that bad, or some other. So let's see if I can turn this on. Does it matter which one?
Yeah, green button.
Green button. Green button. All right, take a couple seconds. Okay, just a couple more seconds. This is not, you know, a credit type question, so don't worry about being graded. Okay, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it. And let's see what you guys said. All right, so 13 of you, or 24%, said that somewhere along the way you had a teacher that inspired you to go into the sciences. All right, just for curiosity's sake, what were some of the others? Does anyone feel comfortable sharing what an other was? Movies, okay. CSI, yeah. What else?
I put teacher.
Okay. The McNair program, okay, so scholarship programs, mentoring programs. Anything else? Okay. What we find is that this is actually pretty consistent when we do nationwide studies and nationwide polls, that people who go into the sciences mostly go into it because of a teacher. So if I had to pick a person, that would be my high school chemistry teacher. It would be my undergraduate physical chemistry teacher. I'd not choose these because they were all chemistry, I promise. A lot of times people don't realize that a scientist is a profession until they come to college. Until they come to college, who really knows what a physicist does for a profession? What does a chemist do for a profession besides CSI? I didn't realize that I truly enjoyed science until I had an awesome biology teacher. And then I turned out to be a biologist, all right? However, on the same side of that coin, if you ask somebody, why do you hate science? 9 times out of 10 is because they had a horrible teacher, all right? They had an awful teacher. My experience, it was the teachers. They were boring. It tends to come down to the teachers. I used to have fun. Teachers were the problem. They showed a big bias, okay? So the question really is which would you rather be? Do you want to be someone that can inspire someone to go into a science? We already know that as graduate students, most of us are pretty passionate about the fields that we're in. Most of us are really interested in chemistry or physics. Let's try to inspire that type of behavior in our students, since somebody probably did it for us. Do you want to be a good teacher? Or do you want to be like this cartoon with the kids saying, we did a focus group of the class and decided that you can't teach? You know, that kind of stings. In 2000, this article was published. So one of the most important factors in the success of our undergraduates in our biology laboratories is the instructors who teach them. Okay, who do you think has a bigger impact on those undergraduates? Do you think it's a professor that has a class of 200 or 500 students for introductory courses? Or you, who may have 15 to 20 students? You're there for longer times. You'll be there for 4 hours. A lot of times the labs are a much less informal, less formal environment. You become friends, you become peers, you have discussions that you typically would not have in the lecture halls, okay, about how in the world did you survive your term paper? Or I don't understand how to balance this reaction. Because some of us are also a lot closer in age, or it's a less formal environment, our students feel a lot more comfortable asking us questions they typically would never ask of a professor. So you have a really great impact on these students. Okay, so now let's talk about why you should care besides the warm, fuzzy feelings. We all know that after we graduate, right now in this economy, it's going to be pretty hard for most of us to find a job, right? It's just a harsh reality that we have to deal with. In 2010, in October, this article was published. It said it's a difficult job market for PhDs right now. And anybody or a candidate with evidence of good preparation for teaching and interest in teaching are more attractive to search committees, okay? You're more attractive to search committees. This doesn't mean just academia, okay? It doesn't mean just academia. If you want to go into industry, chances are you're going to be working with a group or as part of a team, and if you have a good evidence of teaching and being able to take these complicated concepts and break them down so that people can understand them, that makes you more attractive as well, okay? So if we're talking about evidence of good preparation for teaching, what are we talking about? Well, your certificate in college teaching is very good evidence of that. It's something that you went through that showed that you cared enough to go through a 3-day training, follow-up activities, complete all the requirements to get that certificate. If you want to go above and beyond, you can get a certificate with distinction. All right? The explanations for that are in your binders. One of the requirements for these follow-on activities are attending workshops. Okay? After each workshop, the TLC is very good about mailing a letter that will go over the description of the workshop, and what it is that you learned. Hold on to those and put them in your professional portfolios. Hold on to those letters. It gives a description, says thank you for your interest in teaching. Those are very valuable later on. We also have our evaluations from our students. How many of you guys know that evaluations just became public information? Okay, evaluations from students are now posted online. It was a state law, it went into effect last semester. Okay, last semester was the first semester. So all of your student evaluations are posted online for anybody to see. Okay, that's employers, that's future students, that's everybody. To try to minimize the impact of having bad evaluations, UTSA has shortened the student evaluations to 4 or 5 questions. Okay, so it's no longer these 2-page evaluation forms that we've had in the past. They're only 4 and 5 questions. Okay, so they don't give as much information, or they don't give as much insight into your teaching as they used to in the past. So you may need to supplement these with some other information. Other information that you can use are services offered by the TLC. The TLC will come by and they will do a focus group for your class. They will ask questions that you select. They will ask them things like, what are the strengths of this class? What are the strengths of this teacher? What do you think would be more effective if they change? They generate all of this data, all the questions that are coded, and give you a very, very nice package that you can put into that professional portfolio to say, I care enough about my teaching to have my course evaluated by an outside department, and this is what they came up with. That's a very, very powerful tool. The TLC will come into your lab and do that for you. They will also come in and observe your classes, write up a formal report, and give that to you as well. Another thing that the TLC has is the Distinguished TA Award. You can nominate other TAs in your department Faculty can nominate you. Once you're nominated, if you're selected, a university teaching fellow will come in and observe your class, do a formal write-up. Just being nominated for that is a really nice thing to put on your CV. Okay, so these are all those evidence of good preparation for teaching that you can put in to make yourself more competitive in the job market later on. Okay, so let's talk about some other reasons why we care. It's a requirement. We're broke. We like to get paid. You may find out that you actually like teaching. I never had an interest in being a teacher at all, or being a TA. I thought I'd not have the patience for it. I did not want to babysit other people's kids for a living. I really enjoy it. I've been doing it for 7 years now. Personal satisfaction. I've been teaching long enough now to have some of my students go on to med school, have some of my students go on to vet school, have some of my students go on to grad school. It's a really neat feeling when they come up to you and they say, you helped me survive my freshman chemistry class, my analytical class. I'm there because of you. You can help get students excited about science. That's what we're excited about. They may not be this excited about science, but you can still get them excited about science. Your enthusiasm and your passion for your subject is one of your greatest tools that you have as a TA. If you can pass that along to your students, they'll love you and they'll remember you forever. All right, so let's brainstorm. Let's talk about some of the advantages of teaching labs. Who has an advantage for teaching a lab?
It's hands-on.
It's hands-on. Heck yeah. All those presentations that we've been dealing with active learning, our lives are pretty simple. Active learning is built into ours. I mean, you can't get much more active than doing experiments. Hands-on, the experiments that we do are usually pretty cool. That gets students excited. Simulations with MATLAB, with, I can't remember the other ones out there, whatever. And the math labs are pretty exciting. I took a Math of Maps course one time, and we had to map a continent with MATLAB. I didn't care so much about it at the time. Now I think it's kind of cool. All right, what are some other advantages? Experiments, okay. Not so much lecture, so you have a lot less lecture that you typically have to prepare for. Okay, being able to give practical applications to theory to actually help that light bulb click on, that's a lot of fun. What else? Okay, these are the ones that I came up with. I think the greatest advantage of teaching a lab is that it helps you learn the material, okay? When you go in and you have to teach general chemistry or you have to teach freshman physics, you learn the material because you will be asked questions that you never could have anticipated. All right, you have a really great understanding. That will help you in your qualifying exams and your defenses. That will help you later on in your graduate classes. So I think that's a huge advantage for teaching. You have much smaller classes. We don't have to worry about teaching classes of 800 people because that's not realistic for what we do. Hands-on, you cover much more specific topics. You don't have to worry about organizing a 2 or 3 hour lecture. You will cover a very specific topic, a very specific theory, say here's the theory behind it, and then you will move on. It's a much less formal environment. You're there with these students, these 20 students for 3, 4, 5 hours, okay? It's a lot less formal. A lot of times some of these labs are late at night when nobody else is there. So it's a really unique relationship. Prep work is done for you. Love this. Love this. When you can walk into a lab and you have a lab tech that says, here are your solutions, here's all the equipment that you need. All you need to do is just say go. Great. You have a support system. You have safety here that will back you up if you ever have a problem trying to get a student to wear their safety goggles. They will gladly come swoop in and tell them what to do. You have your lab techs, you have your lab coordinators. So for those of you who are new here to UTSA and haven't dealt with this before, which should be all of you, right? You have a lab coordinator, which will coordinate all the TAs for a certain subject most of the time. You'll probably have weekly meetings with them, okay? So that's a great support system. One of the other advantages is a degree of freedom. You don't have to select a textbook. You don't have to meet certain objectives. Most of that will be given to you, but you can have a freedom in how you teach it. You can give a freedom on what activities that you do in the class. So that's another advantage. However, that degree of freedom is also a disadvantage, because you might have a coordinator that gives you a packet and says, I want you to put these notes up on the board, do not deviate, do not do anything. This is the test that you will give, this is the way that you will grade, this is the syllabus, and then you can have the other extreme. It says, you have to write your own syllabus. I don't care what you do, I don't care how you grade, just don't stir the pot. All right, so that is a variability that we have as TAs here at UTSA. And sometimes it can be really frustrating and sometimes it can be great. Time. Teaching takes a lot of time. Grading takes a lot of time. And if you teach the way that you should and if you prepare the way that you should, it's our responsibility of TAs, it's going to take a lot of your time. We're graduate students, we're notorious for not having a lot of time. So we need to find ways to do this efficiently, and we need to find ways to do this that's not taking away from our classes or our research, but that we're still giving the quality of teaching that's expected of us from our departments. Some of you guys may be uncomfortable teaching in front of other classes, may really fear questions. I think that was always my biggest fear. I can do anything you want as long as you don't raise your hand. When you raise your hand, I'm like a deer in the headlights. I freeze up and I'll know what to say. Okay? It's okay if you don't know the answer to a question. It's all right. I used to know a professor, they would start off their class and says, if I do my job right, everybody will learn something today, including me. All right, so it's okay if you say, I don't know the answer to that, I will get back to you. But guess what? You have to get back to them, okay? You just can't drop it and forget it. You have to get back to them. What? Okay. Dealing with difficult students. It happens. Sometimes your students are turds. It just happens. You have to love them anyway, but sometimes they will just annoy you to death. The best way to deal with difficult students is to be prepared. The more time that you spend preparing for your labs, and the better prepared that you are, the better your classroom management will be, the easier of a semester you will have, the fewer problems with difficult students that will arise. Okay? Meet early on with your coordinator. Find out if you're going to have to get a copy of the lab notebook or the lab experiments, the lab manual. Find out if you're going to have to write a syllabus or if there's a common syllabus for the class. Find out what their grading scale is, what their attendance policy is, their late policy, all that fun stuff. Your coordinator is one of your greatest resources. Meet with other TAs who have taught this lab before. That's your other great resource. In my lab, I have a notebook that has combined notes from all the TAs for the last 3 years, okay, for that class. It's like my Bible. It's there on the shelf, nobody touches it, and nobody takes it out of the lab, okay? Your other TAs that have taught that class, they've been there in the trenches, so to speak. Your coordinator can come in and say, this is what's going to happen, but your TAs that have been there in the past will tell you if there's a typo in the lab, if there's a problem with one of the questions, where the students tend to get hung up. They're one of your greatest resources. Okay, one of the best ways that you can be prepared, or one of the best ways that you can avoid dealing with difficult students, is prevention. Okay, so for us to be able to figure out how to prevent these problems with our students, we need to be able to recognize what they are. I'm a data person, so this is a chart that was compiled of the top 10 classroom management issues that TAs experience in their labs. There were 304 TAs that responded to this poll. Then they went ahead and they divided them into US TAs. There were 248 TAs that were from the US that were polled. And there were 56 international TAs, okay? Surprise, number one, the fact that students come to class unprepared. It's shocking, okay? Your students are going to come to class unprepared. Your late policy, your policy on late work that you lay out in your syllabus is the easiest way to fix this problem, okay? One of the labs that I taught, it was the professor's policy that after 5 minutes, that door was shut and locked and you had to attend a different lab, okay? Nobody was late, all right? If you figure out how you're going to address this before it happens, it does not become an issue. Students arrive late for class. Okay, students look bored, disinterested, and yawns while I'm teaching. It happens. Only a few students respond to my questions. Students miss class. Another way put your attendance policy in your syllabus, talk about it early on so this is not an issue, okay? One of the ones that I was really surprised about is that students challenge my comments or lecture. Over 50% of TAs said they've had a student challenge their lecture. That's terrifying to me. If I'm teaching and someone's like, I don't think you know what you're talking about, prove it. I'm like, this is science, it's all experimental. Students pack up books before they leave. Students read the newspaper. Students are overly dependent on me, okay? This is an area where I really struggle, students being overly dependent on me. I still, after all my years, have not found ways to master this. I say every year I'm going to be stern, I'm going to be strict, only come see me during my office hours. Then my students turn into snipers about week 4 or 5 and they pop out of any crevice, any corner of the university. They will come find me in the bathroom. They will come find me in line for lunch. They will find me in the parking lot with their laptops open. So I just have a quick question. So I don't know how to fix that. That's one that I have a hard time with. Students make comments that are offensive. So 35% of international TAs, all right, had a problem with this. It could just be cultural difference, that they're finding some types of behavior offensive, or it could be that students are rude and offensive. All right, so in order for us to prepare for these, I've come up with 6 different scenarios that we're going to talk about in the lab. They go from silly to not so silly. Hopefully all these should be pretty easy. We're going to talk about these as a group, as what you would do, and then maybe some things that I've seen in the past to try to help, and then we're going to move on. So our first scenario is that you are presenting a new concept to your class. You've worked really hard to organize your presentation and find the material very interesting. The energy level in the class is very low. The students appear to be falling asleep and not interested. So, do you ignore the students and continue on, tell the students to take a break, move on to an activity you had planned, or lecture them on the importance of participation on their grade? All right, so we'll go ahead and open this up. Give you about a minute.
And is this what we would do or what we should do?
Yeah. Hopefully they will be the same, but we'll talk about these. Thank you. Can you hear me? It should be on. Is that better? Is that better? Am I still screaming? Okay. All right, about 10 more seconds. Okay, let's see what you guys said. All right, so 54% of you said that you would tell the students to take a break. Okay, all right, so let's talk about a couple of things. First, let's talk about what could be causing this behavior. All right, it could be you. It could be you as a lecturer. I know that never happens, but it could be you. So this is why we try to incorporate active learning into our lectures, right? We've heard in the past that college students have an attention span of about 12 to 15 minutes. 12 to 15 minutes, okay? If you're only lecturing for 20 minutes, all right, stop about halfway through it, do a minute paper, have them jot down what they think the most important thing that you just talked about was, work out an example, pass out cards, whatever you want to do, okay? I've had a lab in the past where I was only allowed to lecture for 15 minutes. I've had a lab in the past where I was required to lecture for a minimum of an hour and a half. An hour and a half. That lab started at 6:30 at night. Okay? Most of the students in there were coming from jobs they've been working from all day. Okay? And you put them in there and you talk to them from 6:30 to 8 o'clock at night, sitting on a stool, they get grouchy. All right, they just get grouchy. There's nothing wrong with telling them to take a 5-minute break, go get a sip of water, because we can't have food or drink in the labs anyway, right? Tell them to go get a sip of water, go to the bathroom, come back. Working in those activities is also another way to keep them from falling asleep or losing interest. Okay? In the labs, what are some activities that you guys could think of? Tell some jokes. Okay? Comic strips are always funny. Tell some jokes. Tell some stories about how what you're talking about relates to real life. Current events. Love it. Current events are an awesome one. I've pulled up profiles of scientists and gone over it, taken a break, talked about someone about Marie Curie, Albert Einstein, whatever. Something interesting to break up the material and move on. Okay, so there's so many things that you can do. You can break it up with jokes, current events, stories. You could do the think, pair, share. So pull up a problem, have them work on it on their own, pair up with someone, compare answers. You can do the muddiest point. Have you guys heard about that one yet? Pass out a note card and say, what is the one thing that you're the most confused of about today? If I had to go over something else, tell me what it could be. All right, pull those up, move on. Okay, let's move on to our second scenario. Midterm is approaching. A student comes to you who's been working very hard, okay, so that's not an issue here, and is in danger of failing. The student tells you that he has to pass this class to keep his financial aid. All right, do you tell the student, this is not my problem, about other services that can be on campus? Don't worry, it'll all work out. Look for the curve. Or that they need to work harder? Okay, take about 10 more seconds. Or they have to find ways to study smarter. Okay? So ways that you can encourage students to develop those types of skills are study groups. The Tomas Rivera Center does a lot of workshops with students on studying smarter, studying more efficiently, studying for tests, developing critical thinking skills. So that would be a great resource. All right? What you don't want to do is be like, that's not my problem, okay? Because then you've just told the student that you don't care, don't come to me, don't talk to me anymore, you've shut down that communication. All right? Pretty easy one. Let's move on to another one. Two students that were lab partners turn in 2 copies of the same graph as their own work. You've already expressed in your syllabus that copying is not allowed, and all the work that must be done must be that of the individual. Do you give the 2 students a 0? Turn the papers over to Judicial Affairs for plagiarism? Tell the students not to do it again? Pretend not to notice? Okay, about 10 more seconds. All right, let's see what you guys said. All right, tell the students not to do it again, what the majority of you guys said. This is a really interesting problem that we find in labs, okay, dealing with the sciences. Students realize the difference, or realizing that copying questions from another student or copying answers is plagiarism. But what they don't think of as copying is when they sit down to computer together, one person types in their data, they're maybe both sitting there and they print off 2 copies. Okay? If they both put their names in it, that is plagiarism. It's probably something that you're going to find. Okay? It's pretty common. It's really easy to tell their copies when they have a misspelling in the title or in one of the legends. Because they'll come up to you and they'll say, well, we're lab partners and we have the same data, so our graph should be the same. There's enough variables when you're designing those graphs that you can tell if it's a copy or not, okay? Some coordinators have different versions of this, all right? I don't really care what you do, okay? If you want, I think turning it over to digital affairs is a little harsh, personally. Giving the students a 0, I've never really seen that done. What I have seen done is that they will take the number of points and then divide it by the number of students that shared the work. So if they had 20 points but 2 students did it, they'll get 10 points each, okay? What I would recommend you doing is that if you have access to a copy machine, write a note on the graph saying all your work needs to be your own, date it, and make a copy of it, all right? Because if you tell the students not to do it again, and then 2 weeks later they continue to do it over and over again, what are you going to do as a backup? What are you going to do to protect yourself? 0, okay? But then they're going to say, well, you never really told me to do it again. And you're going to be like, well, yeah, I did, but you don't have any proof. All right, so keep a copy of it, and then if you need to give them a 0 later on, they can't come back and say, you didn't tell me, you have proof. All right? A lot of times what you have to do is you really have to make sure that you're covering your own butt. We're pretty used to that, right? So anytime you have a question about something, make a copy of it, hold on to it so it will be there for later. All right? Another issue of covering your own butt, this is a mistake that I made as an early TA. Don't give out your phone number. Okay? It's just not smart. My first semester as a TA, we were moving labs halfway through the semester. All right, so we were going to be completely changing. I did not have an office. So I thought, well, I'll just give my students my phone number and they can come meet me for office hours. So I got phone calls to come babysit their children, to come to their house on the weekends as their tutor. So just don't give out your phone number, all right? One is because it's not smart. The other one is because if you're having a verbal conversation, you have no proof of what was said unless you're recording it. So if you have a student that has a question about a makeup policy, making up a lab, a question about a grade, make sure that you tell them, email me. That way you have a written copy of your response and what was agreed to. Another thing is that what happens when students leave us messages? Hi, my name is Gabby, my phone number is 218, and you can't hear anything. You cannot understand a word. So you can't call them back. So then you get your evaluations back and you have all these responses that says they never got back with me. I repeatedly tried to contact them and they never called me back. I couldn't understand your phone number because you were talking 200 miles an hour, but that's not the point. All right, so don't give out your phone number. Make sure all of your communication is through email. Scenario 4. A student comes to lab completely unprepared. They're wearing shorts, flip-flops, and snacking on chips while at the lab bench. So if you're in math, or maybe engineering where you're doing a dry lab, or even in chemistry if you're doing a dry lab, this may not be an issue, okay? But if you are in chemistry, biology, what are you going to do? Are you ask the student to leave, citing safety rules? Ignore them, it's just more trouble than it's worth. Deduct points from that day's lab since they did not follow instructions. Tell them to put the chips away and begin the experiment. All right, about 10 more seconds. All right, let's see what you guys said. Ask the student to leave, citing safety rules. Very good, gold star for everybody today. In the sciences, when we're dealing with chemicals, all right, what is our #1 role as an instructor? Safety. Do not get confused. Safety becomes before making sure they understand what you're talking about on the board. All right? Safety is our #1 rule. If they're in there and if they're eating and they get chemicals on their hand, not only are they going to get sick, they can sue you and they can sue the university. They can sue you personally as a TA. All right? Tell them to leave. Do not feel bad about it because you can say, hey, it's not my rule, it's the university's rule, and move on with your life. All right? If they will not leave, you call safety, and safety will come and make them leave. Okay? Don't mess with this, all right? Don't feel bad or say, I don't want to make them leave, I don't want to have a confrontation, so I'm just going to look past it, all right? On the same page, you have to follow the safety rules as well. Don't go walking into the lab wearing spaghetti straps, flip-flops, and carrying a Coke, okay? You need to wear your goggles, you need to wear your lab coat if that's required, because the students are going to say, well, you're not doing it, and get you in trouble, all right? Okay. Scenario 5. Though he presents it as a joke in class, Brent publicly challenges your knowledge and experience on the basis of your youth. Do you embarrass Brent in front of the class so he won't do it again? Ignore it. Speak with Brent after class, or joke back and change the subject? All right, just a couple more seconds. All right. So the majority of you guys said that you would speak with Brent after class. All right, I think that's a good method. Studies have shown that when you're dealing with classroom management issues or student incivility, speaking after class is one of the most effective ways that you can deal with it. Pull him to the side. If you embarrass him, he's probably just going to get uglier, okay? If you ignore it, it's not going to go away. And sometimes if you have a good relationship with your students and if you're really good about being sarcastic and not being cruel, maybe you can get away with joking. All right, and change the subject. Sometimes not. Be careful. You need to make sure. Wait, hey. I thought I could get by with not pressing the stop button. Whatever, you guys are frozen. They're joking with me. All right. So most effective way is probably to speak with them after class, okay? How many of you guys are undergraduates? They're going to be TAs. You're all by yourself. Okay. If you are really young, this is your first semester, and you're really close in age with your students, one of the easiest things that you can do to avoid problems is to dress professionally, okay? You don't have to be wearing a suit. You don't have to wear heels because it's not safety either. But don't go in there wearing your t-shirt that says legalize marijuana, okay, and expect your students to take you personally, because it doesn't happen, all right? That's one of the easiest things that you can do. Maybe a t-shirt, slacks, and a jacket, nice dress shirt tucked in. If you dress professionally and if you take your job seriously, they'll take you seriously as well, most of the time, until they figure out that you're a fraud. All right, last one. Jonathan is friends with someone in another section of the same class but with a different teacher, and they compare your classes all the time. Yours is seen as more difficult, and Jonathan believes that you grade more harshly. Do you tell Jonathan to refer back to the syllabus? Ask Jonathan if he has a disagreement about his grade or if he sees you as unfair? Check back with your coordinator to make sure you are following their instructions? Or tell Jonathan that his friend must be smarter. I'm going to freeze you this time, so make sure you have your final answer. All right, a couple more seconds. Just curious from all the giggling. Okay. Ask Jonathan if he has a disagreement about his grade or if you are unfair. Okay. So this is a funny question. True story. All right. Had this happened to me, a bunch of my students thought that I was grading harshly or that I was so much harder than the other TAs, and I will admit that I'm a hard TA. I know I'm a hard TA. I tell them up front. Okay, I expect them to know their stuff. When we investigated this a little bit further, we found out that one of the other TAs was giving completion grades for lab reports. Well, no kidding. You know, I'm going to be harder if they're giving completion grades. In an issue like that, you go and you speak with a coordinator, or you talk to your student and you be like, look, I'm making sure that you know the material that you are responsible for. You'll thank me later, okay? If you think that I'm unfair, that's a different story, okay? You will not necessarily get bad evaluations if you are a hard TA, okay? You will not get bad evaluations if you are a hard TA. You will get bad evaluations if you are unfair, all right? So in everything that you do, make sure that you're being fair. So don't let one student say, oh, well, I know she's trying hard, and it's okay if she really didn't answer the question, she's had a hard day, and give her points anyway, all right, and not do the same. You need to make sure that you're fair and that you're treating all of your students equally, or that will come back to bite you in the butt, okay? All right. How to be a good teacher. Be relaxed and easygoing. You can have fun with some of your students. Just make sure you're being professional and respectful. Be professional. Be creative, especially with some of those activities that you want to work into your workshops or into your lectures. Make sure that your knowledge of your subject is up to date. Okay? You never want to tell a student something that's wrong. It's better to be unsure than to be wrong. If you need to get back with them, that's fine. Have enthusiasm and passion for your subject. That's your greatest tool that you can give your students. Demonstrate empathy, all right? Empathy. I understand that you're going through a hard time. I'm sorry that you're going through this. Let me know what I can do to help. There are some great resources here at UTSA, counseling services, disability services. Let me know if there's something that I can do. Be fair. Anticipate misconceptions or problem areas that your students are going to have and try to address them before they start. Set appropriate goals, give positive feedback, and make sure that you are prepared for your class, okay? So, in your handout on page 6 is a checklist that looks like this. And it's a checklist of all the things that I thought you may want to consider, or that I wish I would have considered at one point in time when I was a TA. All right, so on page 6 of your handout that you just got, it's separated into before your first class, for all of your classes, and then during your first class, all right? One of the most surprising things that you probably need to go check on before you go to teach is how are you going to get into your classroom, okay? Nothing stinks more than showing up ready to teach and find out that the door's locked and you have no way of getting in, all right? So go visit your classroom before that first class and find out if you need card access, if you're going to have a key, if someone else is going to let you in. If someone else is going to let you in, how are you going to get a hold of them if they are not there? All right, what is a backup plan? Is there a desk or a podium? If you are a PowerPoint fanatic and you do everything on PowerPoint and you show up to your class and there is not a projector there, you can request a projector and a laptop to be delivered to your classroom and set up for you all semester long. And the website that you need for the form is on this handout. Okay? You can set it up as a recurring event, so you don't have to fill out a new one each time. You can just fill out one per semester. Okay? If there is chalk or dry erase markers, do you need to bring them with you? Yes, sir. Where would what? So on that website is the third box. It says classroom equipment and support request form. That's where that's at. Some of your classrooms, you may have to bring your own chalk, or you may have to bring your own dry erase markers. Or it may be a good idea just to have them just in case, because you could show up there and they could be all dry, and it's after hours and nobody is there to help you. All right, so carry a couple extra in your bag. How many students will you have? If you're going to be making handouts or you're going to be doing some activities, make sure you have enough for your students. You can find out on ASAP, okay? On ASAP, under your class schedule, how many students have registered for your class. All right, be sure to meet with your lab coordinator and see if you're going to have to make your own syllabus or if you're going to have to make your own description for that lab. If you do, there are steps on what to include. One of the things not to include is your phone number. All right, if you turn the page, for each class, familiarize yourself with the experiment. Okay, you need to know what the expected outcome is. You need to know how long that reaction takes to change colors. You need to know how to calibrate that pH electrode. And it may not be the same electrode that you used as your undergraduate. All right? Nothing stinks more than having a student come in and ask you, am I doing this right? Should it have changed colors by now? And you say, I don't know. They will not forgive you for that. Okay? So if you need to go do the experiment beforehand, if you're not familiar with it, make arrangements with your coordinator or with the lab coordinator that's in charge of all the lab techs to go in there and spend a couple of hours. Okay? Software, being familiar with software, with everything. Where the equipment is at in the lab, you maybe have help, but sometimes your lab tech's not going to be there and you don't want to be wandering around. Write out a brief lecture with examples. For each one of your lectures, my recommendation to you is to be sure to include how this relates to the real world or real life, and then how these lectures relate to each other. How does it relate to experiments that you've done in the past? And how does it relate to experiments that you've done in the future? Those are two of the most common complaints that we get back from students on evaluations. That the teacher did not make this applicable to real life situations or how it relates to me, and that they taught the courses as they were disconnected. The lectures were all disconnected. If you teach the material disconnected and that they don't relate to each other, the student will see it. They will not see the relationship. All right? So be sure, say, okay, last week we looked at doing a titration with acid and base. This week we're using the exact same method, but a redox, an exchange of electrons. If it's just that simple, make sure that you link everything together. All right? Try to anticipate muddy points and questions. This is where those other TAs can help you. In your first class, dress professionally, even if it's just for the first class. Get things started off on the right foot. You only have one chance to make that first impression, and that will set the tone for the rest of the semester. Write your course number and your name on the board. Talk to your students as they come in. If you really want to be an awesome, awesome TA, you can go to ASAP and download a class photo list and memorize your students' names before you ever see them. Okay? You don't even have to memorize them. I've done the trick where I printed it off, carried it with me in my binder, then they would raise their hand and be like, yes, Kelly. And they sit there and look at you. All right? Easy, easy. You only have 15 or 20 students. It's not that bad. All right? There's instructions on how to get that form on ASAP on your handout. Treat students with respect. It's important to immediately establish a rapport with them. Talk to them that first day. What you do not want to do that first day is come in and say, here's your syllabus, here's your schedule, have a good day, I'll see you later. All right? Go over the important material. Tell them what to call you. Okay? Hi, my name is Gabby. All right? If I expect my students to call me as Miss Haby, or refer to me as Miss Haby, or Professor Haby, I better be willing to answer my students back with Mr. Jones or Miss Jones, whatever. All right? It's a two-way street. Set the tone for the class. Is it going to be informal discussion, back and forth with questions, or are you going to give a lecture and then have a question and answer period? Whatever you intend to do for the rest of the semester, start that first day, and that will stop a lot of these problems. Okay? Okay. I think that that is all that I have. So if you have any questions, I just want to leave you with this. It's never too early or too late to change your teaching. Okay? When scientists become unwilling to experiment and change, they stop being scientists. All right? The thing is that not a lot of scientists look at teaching as a research field also. All right? So teaching is a research field. And when you become unwilling to change your teaching habits, you're no longer a scientist. Okay? We observe, we change, and we learn. And then this quote, the real problem is not adding technology to current organization of the classroom, but changing the culture of teaching and learning. Okay? So just because we were taught a certain way doesn't mean that we have to teach that way forever. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.